Thank you for tuning into this episode of History's Greatest Battles. Subscribe and share this episode and podcast with a friend. Our battle today involves a defeat so absolutely catastrophic that the losing city-state Athens temporarily set aside democracy, the very thing they believed responsible for their ascendancy. The man with the silver tongue that convinced the populace to vote in favor of the battle lived, and of him it was written that Athens both loved him and hated him fiercely. The reasons why explained at length in this episode. He met his fate years later in his home, a mystery to this very day, whether by Athenian assassins, Spartans or Spartan sympathizers, Persian gold, or the brothers of a young woman he had spent time with. It's simply not known. But according to Plutarch, quote, "The party sent to kill him did not dare to enter his house, but surrounded it and set it on fire. When Alcibiades was aware of this, he gathered together most of the garments and bedding in the house and cast them on the fire. Then, wrapping his cloak about his left arm and drawing his sword with his right, he dashed out, unscathed by the fire, before the garments were in flames, and scattered the barbarians, who ran at the mere sight of him. Not a man stood ground against him, or came to close quarters with him, but all held aloof, and shot him with javelins and arrows. Thus he fell, and when the barbarians were gone, Timandra took up his dead body, covered and wrapped it in her own garments, and gave it such brilliant and honorable burial as she could provide. Let's now find out why and experience the Battle of Syracuse."
Welcome to History's Greatest Battles, Season 1, Episode 48, The Battle of Syracuse, 415 to 413 BC. Athenian forces, roughly 200 war galleys and 45 to 50,000 men. Syracusan forces, unknown, though likely similar to Athenian numbers with an addition of 4,400 Spartans. The crushing defeat of Athens shattered its naval supremacy in the eastern Mediterranean, precipitating its fall as the foremost Greek polis. This disaster not only stripped Athens of its dominance, but also extinguished its ambitions of establishing control across the entire Mediterranean, thwarting what might have been an empire stretching to Carthage and Rome.
The First Peloponnesian War erupted as Sparta, the iron-fisted commander of the Peloponnesian League, squared off against Athens, the undisputed master of the Delian League, each rallying their allies like warlords summoning their clans to battle. Since the crushing victories over Persia at Salamis and Plataea in 480 and 479 BC, Athens had surged to the pinnacle of Greek power, casting a long shadow over the Hellenic world. Athens, commanding the seas with an unchallenged naval supremacy, transformed itself into the dominant force of the Delian League, a coalition of Greek city-states sworn to halt Persian ambition and strike fear into the heart of Asia Minor. No city-state dared question Athenian authority. Athens, now bloated with confidence and power, extorted vast sums from its allies, seizing league contributions at will, never offering an explanation for the wealth that flowed into its coffers. Instead of pouring their riches into defense, the Athenians indulged in a grand spectacle of culture and architecture, erecting monuments to their supremacy while neglecting the hard edge of war. Unsurprisingly, the polis footing the bill for this extravagance seethed with resentment, knowing their wealth funded Athenian vanity, not the defense against Persia. Athens moved with a ruthless hand through the web of Greek diplomacy, forging alliances when convenient while crushing weaker neighbors into submission, leaving them little choice but to fall in line. Between 460 and 445, Athens locked horns with Sparta's land forces in a series of bitter skirmishes, all the while extending its grasp abroad, fueling Egyptian rebellions to harass Persia in distant lands. The endless fighting led nowhere, and in 445, Sparta and Athens grudgingly agreed to a truce. Yet the fire of their rivalry burned hotter than ever, unresolved and waiting to ignite once more. Few moments in history can match the tangled web of politics, betrayal, and ambition that set the stage for the Second Peloponnesian War, a conflict born from the chaos itself. Athenian domination over the northern Greek city-states fueled a festering resentment, The endless schemes and backroom deals only strengthened Athens' grip on the region, and soon the city appeared ready to forge a Greek empire under its own iron rule. The Athenian navy imposed its will across the Mediterranean, expanding Athenian rule with efficiency and merciless resolve. At last, the arrogance of Athens pushed the Greek world to its breaking point, and the city-states, chafing under Athenian tyranny, turned to Sparta as their only hope of salvation. When Athens dared to interfere in the affairs of the Peloponnese, long the domain of Spartan power, it was the final insult. In 431, the drums of war thundered once more, and the conflict reignited with fury. This war became known as the ultimate clash of titans: Sparta, the supreme master of the land, and Athens, the unrivaled ruler of the seas. Sparta boasted the deadliest army of the age, while Athens commanded the most formidable fleet, yet neither power could strike the decisive blow that would bring the other to its knees. Sparta and its allies choked Athens in a relentless siege, seizing the fertile countryside, yet they could not breach the vital port of Piraeus. Athens, fed by its unstoppable navy, continued to receive the supplies it needed, keeping the city alive. The Athenian navy struck back with savage raids along Sparta's coastline, freeing the enslaved helots from the brutal yoke of Spartan oppression, stirring rebellion where once there was only fear. Both powers inflicted heavy blows, but neither could land the killing stroke that would end the other's dominance. For a decade, the struggle raged on, unrelenting. Yet in 421, exhaustion and stalemate forced both sides to the table, and a fragile peace was once again struck. Though Sparta and Athens welcomed the pause, their allies simmered in discontent, frustrated by a peace that failed to return the lands and glory they had lost in the fires of war. Even with the treaty in place, their vassal states bickered and skirmished, dragging their masters into the fray whenever it suited them, ensuring peace was never more than a simple illusion. For 6 tense years, the fragile peace held, but in 414, it was shattered by the ambitions of Alcibiades, a firebrand general in Athens whose thirst for glory reignited the flames of war. Alcibiades, with his silver tongue and boundless ambition, stirred the citizens of Athens into a fever, urging them to unleash their might against Syracuse, a powerful city-state on the distant island of Sicily. He warned that Syracuse was the lifeblood of Sparta's food supply, and if Athens could seize control of Sicily, a land still tied to its Greek roots, Athens would stand in an unassailable position of dominance. By severing Sparta's vital food chain, Athens could cripple its rival, bringing it to its knees. And more than that, taking Syracuse would hand Athens the gateway to rule the western Mediterranean, its fleets sweeping unopposed from Sicily to the distant shores of Iberia. With Syracuse in hand, Athens could crush the fledgling powers of Carthage and Rome before they even had a chance to rise. From Italy to North Africa to the far reaches of Iberia, home to Carthage's fearsome mercenaries, Athens would command legions of warriors, using them to obliterate Sparta and crown itself the undisputed master of the known world. With words as sharp as a blade, Alcibiades vanquished the cautious voices of his political rivals, rallying the Athenian people to his audacious vision of conquest. The vote for war was cast, and fortune smiled on Athens as Segesta, a Sicilian city desperate under the threat of Syracuse, promised to fund the mighty expedition. Alcibiades, along with the cautious Nicias and the bold Lamachus, were dispatched to Sicily, each with a share in leading what would become one of the most ambitious campaigns in Athenian history. In June 415, Athens launched an armada like no other, 27,000 strong, with 134 triremes slicing through the waves and 130 transports brimming with the finest hoplites, 5,000 in total. Alongside them marched 1,300 archers, javelin throwers, and slingers, with a mere 30 horses to add to this vast force. Trailing this mighty host were 130 supply ships, ensuring the army would not falter from lack of provisions. In their arrogance, the Syracusans dismissed the whispers of a Greek invasion, paying no heed until the horizon was blackened by the sails of Athenian ships. What saved Syracuse from immediate doom was not its strength, but the legendary Greek talent for discord, internal bickering that stalled the Athenian sword at the moment it should have struck. Nicias, ever a cautious hand, argued for retreat when word reached the Athenians that Segestus' promised gold was nothing but an empty offer. Lamachus, with a warrior's instinct, demanded they strike at once to crush Syracuse while its forces remained unprepared and their morale in tatters. But once again, it was Alcibiades' soaring oratory that swayed the assembly. He urged the Athenians to march across Sicily, rallying the local cities that held grudges against Syracuse, promising they would rise in rebellion. Yet this delay gave the Syracusans precious time to rally their warriors, strengthen their defenses, and prepare for the storm they now knew was coming. Alcibiades' grand scheme crumbled into failure, for not a single Sicilian city rose to their cause. No allies came forward, leaving the Athenians isolated and vulnerable. Before long, a message from Athens reached Alcibiades. In his absence, he had been charged with blasphemy and was commanded to return and face judgment. Arrested and bound for trial, Alcibiades slipped through the fingers of his captors when their ship touched the shores of Italy. In a dramatic turn, he fled to none other than Sparta, the very enemy he had spent his life antagonizing, now seeking refuge among those he had sworn to destroy. Once in Sparta, Alcibiades laid bare the full extent of Athens' imperial ambitions, explaining how the fall of Syracuse would choke the Spartan war machine, cutting off their vital supply lines. Sparta, bound by its truce with Athens, initially refused to act. But when desperate emissaries from Syracuse arrived, pleading for help, the Spartan heart began to waver. In the end, Sparta could not resist the call to arms. They pledged to send a general to lead the Syracusan forces, and Corinth, ever loyal to Sparta, dispatched a fleet to aid the beleaguered city. With Alcibiades now far from the battlefield, the Athenians finally launched their long-awaited assault on Syracuse. Though they smashed through a disorganized Syracusan defense, the Athenians faltered, unable to secure total victory due to a crippling lack of cavalry. Worse still, Lamachus, their most aggressive leader, fell in battle, leaving the indecisive Nicias alone in combat. Nicias, weighed down by caution and doubt, lacked the resolve to drive the Athenians to triumph. As winter loomed, the Athenians entrenched themselves in siege warfare, constructing a wall to mirror Syracuse's defenses, attempting to strangle the city by land. Their plan was simple. The wall would block all aid from land, while their superior navy would still off Syracuse from the sea, trapping the city in a tightening noose. Yet both schemes collapsed into failure. Syracusan raids, sharp, relentless, harried the Athenians at every turn, thwarting their efforts to complete the wall and breaking their momentum. Despite their victories, morale within Syracuse began to crack as the siege dragged on and the weight of impending defeat hung over the city. In a desperate town meeting, surrender was on the lips of many. But before the final word could be spoken, the Corinthians arrived, breathing new life into the defense. At this critical juncture, Gylippus, the Spartan general, landed on the coast, rallying 2,000 men to his banner. He led them to fight the Athenians with the fury of a commander who knew victory was within his grasp. Gylippus marched his force onto the high plateau west of Syracuse, catching Nicias off guard. The Athenians, reeling from the surprise, could do nothing to stop him from reaching the beleaguered city. With cold precision, Gylippus directed the construction of a counterwall, slicing through the plain like a blade. This brilliant maneuver handed Syracuse control over the northern half, and with it, access to the island's resources. By the summer of 414, a desperate Nicias, crippled by doubt, sent a plea back to Athens: either abandon the invasion or send reinforcements equal in strength to the force already lost to indecision and bloodshed. Athens answered the call, dispatching fresh troops, but Sparta shattered the fragile truce, launching attacks meant to cripple or halt the reinforcements before they could reach Sicily. That summer, the Athenians and Syracusans clashed in a relentless campaign of wall building. But it was Gylippus who outmaneuvered his foes, gaining the upper hand in this brutal war of attrition. By the time spring of 413 dawned, Gylippus, poised for the kill, was ready to unleash his full strength upon the beleaguered Athenians. With precision, Gylippus struck. His navy launched a vicious assault on the Athenian base at Plemmyrium, positioned at the southern mouth of Syracuse's harbor, catching Nicias off guard. As the Athenian soldiers abandoned their posts to witness the spectacle of the naval battle, Gylippus seized the moment, storming the town and capturing it. Though the Athenian fleet mauled the Corinthians in a brutal sea engagement, their victory was hollow. They had lost their vital stronghold at Plemmyrium. Forced now to retreat, the Athenians moored deeper within the harbor, where the confined waters would strangle their greatest asset, the maneuverability of their famed navy. This marked the beginning of Athens' downfall in Sicily. The trap was slowly tightening around their necks, and the inevitable collapse loomed on the horizon. Weeks later, word reached Gylippus that a second Athenian force was en route, and with a fierce resolve, he vowed to crush his enemies before the reinforcements could turn the tide. So Gylippus struck again, this time with cunning. He unleashed his army in a feint, drawing the Athenian sailors into a chaotic distraction while his true plan unfolded. His strategy worked flawlessly. As Gylippus's ships surged into the harbor, they found the Athenian navy in disarray, scrambling to ready their vessels, unprepared for the vicious close-quarters battle that was about to unfold. For 3 brutal days, the battle raged in fits and bursts. But this time, the combined might of Corinth and Syracuse seized the upper hand, driving the Athenians to the brink of disaster. At point-blank range, Corinthian and Syracusan archers unleashed a deadly hail of arrows upon the Athenian ships, cutting down scores of sailors and turning the decks into slaughterhouses. Though a devastating blow to Athenian morale, the defeat was not yet the final nail in their coffin. Athens still clung to hope, battered but not broken. That hope flickered back to life when Demosthenes, leading the second Athenian force, arrived in July of 413, bringing with him the promise of redemption and a renewed bid for victory. Demosthenes, taking full command from the sickly Nicias, wasted no time. He launched a bold offensive, determined to seize the plateau, dominating Syracuse, and resume the siege with an unrelenting Athenian force. In a daring nighttime maneuver, Demosthenes dispatched his troops to scale the steep western slopes of the plateau. They struck swiftly, overwhelming a stunned Syracusan garrison at Euryalus, catching them completely off guard. But Gylippus retaliated with a ferocious counterattack. In the chaos of night fighting, the Athenians faltered, losing their momentum and, with it, the battle. Demosthenes, unable to regain a foothold on the plain, was forced to confront the harsh reality. The mission had failed, and there was no choice but to retreat. The Athenian army hastily prepared to withdraw, loading their ships for the journey home. But at the last moment, a full lunar eclipse on August the 27th, 413, halted their departure as superstitions gripped their leaders. Nicias, deeply superstitious, declared they would wait a full month before sailing, unwittingly handing Gylippus the opportunity he needed to deliver the final, fatal blow. Seizing the moment, Gylippus anchored his fleet across the mouth of the harbor, chaining his ships together to form an impenetrable blockade. Trapped in the cramped confines of the harbor, the Athenians, stripped of their naval agility, were decimated. 50 of their ships were lost to the Syracusans, who only sacrificed 26 in return. Demoralized and broken, the Athenian crews refused to fight any longer, begging to abandon the sea and make a desperate retreat by land. In the chaos of their retreat, Gylippus divided the Athenian forces into 2, isolating each and destroying them in turn on the blood-soaked plains of Sicily. Out of the 45 to 50,000 men Athens had hurled into the Sicilian campaign, a mere 7,000 lived to see its brutal conclusion. These survivors were condemned to chains and sold into slavery. Nicias and Demosthenes, however, met a darker fate, executed despite Gylippus's explicit orders to spare them. Syracuse, once teetering on the brink of surrender and utterly unprepared for war, was saved by the sheer brilliance and tenacity of Gylippus, whose command turned the tide of history. Thanks to this victory, Syracuse remained a free and a formidable power in the Western Mediterranean for centuries, until the city was finally crushed beneath the weight of the titanic struggle between Rome and Carthage in the 3rd century BC. Athens' fortunes plummeted. Though the ships and men lost in Sicily could be replaced, the damage to Athenian naval power was utterly crippling. Worse still, the blow to their once fearsome reputation reverberated across the Greek world. Sensing weakness, members of the Delian League began to slip from Athens' grasp. Persia, smelling blood, launched an offensive to reclaim lost territory in Asia Minor, while Sparta, emboldened by the Athenian defeat, pursued naval power, aided by Persian gold, eager to extract vengeance. Desperate to salvage its crumbling empire, Athens turned its attention to the east. Newly built ships were sent to protect its possessions in Asia Minor, as the city fought to maintain a grip on its fading power. Yet the new crews Athens hurriedly mustered were a shadow of the veterans who had perished in Sicily, lacking the skill and experience that had once made Athens dominant at sea. Despite brief flashes of victory, Athens' naval might was utterly annihilated at Agaspotami in 405, where the last Athenian fleet was obliterated in a stunning blow that sealed the city's fate. In the narrow waters of the Hellespont, where the Aegean meets the Black Sea, Lysander, Sparta's ruthless commander, pounced on Athens' final fleet as its sailors idled ashore gathering supplies, striking a death blow to their resistance. Lysander captured 170 ships, fully intact, their crews slaughtered in cold revenge by Spartan sailors, many of whom bore deep grudges from past Athenian atrocities. With no fleet left to defend them, Athens lay prostrate, helpless before the Spartan siege tightening around its walls. Once the master of the Greek world, Athens limped through the harsh winter of 405 to 404, only to bow and surrender as the spring sun rose over its fallen glory. It was Athens' catastrophic defeat at Syracuse that set all of this in motion, unraveling the empire one loss at a time. Had Athens heeded the counsel of Lamachus and struck immediately upon their arrival, Syracuse would likely have crumbled to dust, yielding easily to Athenian might. With Syracuse in their grasp, Athens could have quickly consolidated its power in Sicily, bending the local population to its will, however reluctantly, and establishing a major stronghold in the Western Mediterranean. Carthage and Rome were mere shadows of the empires they would later become, and with their nascent power so easily checked, Athens could have dominated both without resistance. The resources and manpower from these conquests would have forged an unstoppable Athenian empire, the very dream that Alcibiades had conjured in his speeches, an empire unmatched and unchallenged. Without the rise of Rome, or perhaps delayed by centuries, the course of European history would have been irrevocably altered, a different world where Athenian banners might have flown over distant lands. But fate had a different design. The defeat at Syracuse ended Athens' reign as the supreme polis, shattering its ambitions of empire. Sparta, for a brief and bloody period, attempted to rule all of Greece, but its rigid militaristic society was ill-suited to the wider Greek world, and its bid for dominance collapsed under its own weight. For decades, Greece languished in chaos, until Philip of Macedon stormed onto the scene in the 340s, uniting the squabbling polises under his iron grip. His son, Alexander, took that unity and forged not the Western empire Athens had once dreamed of, but a magnificent Eastern empire that stretched from Greece to the very edge of the known world. And in so doing, Alexander altered the fate of Asia itself, shaping a world Athens could never have imagined.